So, hi, everybody. I'm Nick Mima and Ann Marsh, who works with us. Both of us are facilitators in the rebuilding program. We're both here today to talk to you about how it is that you can deal with the first year of firsts. And Ann, why don't you jump in and we'll go back and forth. And what suggestions would you start with for people who are dealing with the firsts?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about this, and I recently had my class, and I talked with my class members about that and their experience with the recent holidays and the winter holidays, and they were, it, depending on their holidays, did depend on how intentional they were about planning ahead of time. So I think one of the things that's important is to be intentional about how you're planning to spend some of the anticipated firsts, which
Right?
typically are holidays and birthdays and those. And then, of course, there's also unanticipated firsts. But with the anticipated first, I think it's important to prepare and be intentional.
So that's where I was going to go as well, is we know they're coming. And by first, we're talking about birthdays, we're talking about anniversaries, we're talking about we think of the holiday season being Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, but there's all the other holidays, including Valentine's Day, and then there's vacations. There's graduations, there's baptisms, the kind of things that being divorced is the first of, and some of which involve directly or indirectly the ex, and some of which are just going on with my life without the ex and doesn't directly involve the ex. And so, excuse me. So that's a major thing is just being prepared. And so you have some suggestions about what kinds of things they can do to be preparing for?
Well, so a couple ideas in terms of preparing. I think there's two things that are important. One is allowing and planning for the grief that is inevitably going to come up so that you can allow the space and time and honor whatever feelings are going to come up so that you do plan to be able to not just suppress those emotions, but allow and plan for a way to structure time and space to honor that so that you aren't just throwing, that out. And then the other, well, maybe I'll just stop there and see what you might add to that.
Yeah, so the I came up with this an acronym called BRAIN. B stands for betrayal, R stands for rejection, A stands for abandoning, I for ignoring, and N for neglecting. And the reason I came up with the acronym is because in the past we have tended to betray ourselves, reject ourselves, abandon ourselves, ignore and neglect ourselves. In a lot, in our work, as you know, we focus on how important it is to transition out of the concept, the consciousness, excuse me, of not enoughness into the consciousness, I am enough and there is enough. So scarcity, victim, abundance, real self, authentic self. And so if we think about that, meaning what's the opposite of betrayed, we can come up with some. So I'm working on an acronym for the antithesis of, but it's certainly caring for myself. It's certainly paying attention to myself, having empathy for myself, having attention and acceptance for myself. So I'll come up with an acronym another time. But so if we did that, if we were mindful about doing the opposite of abandoning, neglecting, rejecting, betraying, and ignoring ourselves, then we would be focused on meeting our real needs. And in the past, in what we call the prison cell of not enoughness, we're trapped inside that. We're focused outside, and we're not meeting our needs. So now this is a whole new moment in our lives where what I want and what I need and what I feel and what I think and what I do matters. And how do we make that true? How do we make that real? And so that's where I start thinking, because I'm reminded of Einstein when he said a problem cannot be solved in the consciousness in which it was created. And so in the past, we've been in this mindset and this consciousness of not enoughness, and we've been doing all those, focusing on what does he want, what does she want, what do they want, and now what the question is, what do I need first and foremost? And so how do I go about meeting my needs in a planful way? You know, not just on the first, but the firsts are part of a life created out of paying attention to what I need. And if I do pay attention to what I need, then the firsts are going to be created in such a way that they meet needs that I have. So that's coming back in, and now we can go back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is that discerning of what do I actually want and need. And it can be a very hard thing initially because we've spent so much time self-abandoning that we don't really know. So it takes some time to really reflect and think about if I, and allow ourselves the freedom to truly get in touch with what is it that I really want and need. And then the next step is also asking and communicating that to others. So this woman in my class this week was intentional about a milestone birthday, her first milestone birthday without her ex. And she was very clear to communicate with her adult children, I need to do something that day. And I'd love for you, if you'd like to plan something, that'd be great, but there's no pressure. But let me know if you're not, because then I will plan. So she was very intentional about determining what it was that she wanted, but then she took the next step of communicating what she wanted and needed to her support system.
So getting clear what it was and then being able to communicate it and then put it into action. Yeah, absolutely. You and I, in a previous panel that we did together, talked about how important it was to really circle the wagon, so to speak, identifying all the people in your support system and being able to, in a planful way, connect with them. And so there's some people, for example, that one of us might be comfortable traveling with. When another one, there's no way we want to travel with them, but they're great friends to have lunch with and to go hikes with. So I think and so that's one thing is that there's a real need for connection that we all have, purposeful connection. So and then there is also a real need to fulfill purpose, to have purpose in our lives. And most of us were in a relationship as it deteriorated, and it may have been like 10, 15, 20 years as it was deteriorating. And so, we in our programs, we talk about entanglement, emotional entanglement, or enmeshment. And now we're talking about unenmeshing, disentangling. And so now all of a sudden, what is it that I want to do with my life? And for some people, that is an overwhelming question. But nonetheless, getting divorced gives us the opportunity to do things that we could never do before. And so purpose is something. So taking classes and things you're interested in, doing workshops and going to places that really energize you and bring a sense of fulfillment. So that's, those are, we're going to keep going back and forth, but those are some thoughts I have about that.
And along those same lines, so in terms of creating community, connecting with community, following passions, becoming creative, and getting out of whatever rut we may have been in, in addition to that, really being able to identify, do for yourself what you might have counted on your ex doing for you. So, buying yourself those gifts that you might have always wanted, getting yourself flowers or chocolates or whatever it is, but honoring and understanding is sort of that authentic consciousness that I can actually meet my own needs. And it's empowering that I don't have to rely on anybody else to meet those needs. And I think around firsts, around holidays, around those type of landmarks, we may have relied on the past, and society may have given us the message that somebody else has to meet those needs. So it's quite empowering to really feel free to be able to meet those needs ourselves.
So, the need to learn, the need to grow as a person, the need to have purpose and fulfill purpose, the need, I think you mentioned this, the need to be creative.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people say, well, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. The reality is that all of us are creating all the time. There's the notion that creating is bringing something into reality that didn't exist before. So this day never existed before. So I'm creating my experience in this day. Adding a new spice to a dish is being creative. I'm creating a conversation. You and I are creating a dialogue together. Taking a different route home from the way you usually do, going to a different grocery store is creating a different kind of experience. So creativity is implicit in our DNA. We are called creatures, creating. And there's such fulfillment that then gets, so by the way, a lot of people, my wife grew up with the notion that she couldn't draw. And so years ago, we did that course, drawing from the right side of the brain. At the end, her drawings, there was like 3 or 4 of them. You couldn't tell that she didn't know how to draw because they were good drawings. And it was just, she had to the teacher was used to working with people who had this mindset, I can't draw. And so now we have a tile in our kitchen that says, if you can walk, you can dance. And if you can talk, you can sing. And so there's so many different ways in which creativity. I had never been to a karaoke establishment before, and 2 weeks ago my niece had a birthday party, and I didn't, so all these people are standing up and singing, right? And so it was quite. And yesterday I went to a play here in Boulder, and 3 women together from Boulder who had put together, it wasn't really a play, it was more of a shared kind of experience where they were talking about grief and their life experiences, dealing with aging parents, dealing with kids that are growing older. One of them had some physical limitations that had been developing, but they also then talked about fun, and they also talked about humor. So for me, humor and play are really, really important post-divorce. We all know that when we're in the trenches trying to figure how do I possibly get out of this, and thinking this is never going to end, never going to. So humor and play seem like remote constructs, but just going to the stand-up comedy, going to whatever play means. Play is such a thing. When my wife now has a grandchild who's like 12 weeks old, so you can't really play with them, but that's coming, right? Being with little, and then you can play with your dog, right? So we talk about that. And so I'm just wondering if you have any things more you want to add in.
I think one of the pieces of advice that I heard early on that goes along those lines is just practice saying yes to things that you might have previously said no to. So opportunities, if friends invite you to do something that is just not in your comfort zone, start saying yes, because the opportunity and connection is essential for allowing ourselves to grow and have new opportunities. And, we can get into an isolation mode. So in addition to coming up with and looking through meetups or whatever, and following those things that are of an interest, also say yes when people invite you to come do something that you previously may not have. That's something that I think of along those lines in terms of trying new things and fulfilling needs in lots of different ways.
You had mentioned Michael Singer earlier when we were just talking, and he wrote the
Untethered Soul.
but he also wrote the book about yes. I've forgotten the title. Was it The Year of Yes or something like that?
Oh, right. Yes.
In which he intentionally, when opportunities would come up, he would just, for a year, he'd just say yes to it. And there's an author by the name of Blackson, Blackson, who wrote a book about surrender. By surrender, he doesn't mean falling, getting on your knees and begging or whatever, surrendering to life and saying yes to, because the premise is that his premise is that we're connected, if we're open to it, to an infinite universe of possibilities. And we can imagine that we'd like something to go a certain way. We make plans, goals, etc. And he just premises that there's so much more to be experienced in life if we just open ourselves up to say yes, instead of having a very limited scope of this is what I'm going to do, and that's all I'm going to do, and then outside of that is this infinite universe. And so I think both of those books are pointing to willingness to be flexible, open, and going with the flow, so to speak.
Yep. Creating new opportunities, new energy. Yeah.
So I guess the question I have for you is, you've gone through your own relationship ending, or a couple of them, and just from your own experience, is there something that you can draw on that would be helpful, you could recommend to people?
I think so. I think early on, I'm remembering my very first Christmas, and we were sitting around, and I had 4 daughters there, and we were doing some of the regular traditions. And my oldest said to me, are we going to talk about this? And basically brought into like, let's talk about this explicitly, that this is hard. This is different. We're here together. Dad's not here. And what we used to imagine things to be like are no longer that way. So I think one of the things that I needed help from one of my adult children on was to not avoid talking about the hard things with, people I trust, but also family members or children, being able to, so that it's not an elephant in the room, that we don't just avoid it, so that we allow that opportunity to be explicit about this is how it's different, this is how it's hard. Along those same lines, something that I learned when I was in class with you, Nick, was the idealized self-image, but also our idealized image of the other. So it's really important that we not romanticize, these holidays and, when I think back, I'm never going to have that again. I might have been somewhat in that remorse and grief. And then I recognized I never have to put up with time, energy, and effort into a gift that my ex would either re-gift or return. So recognizing that it wasn't all ideal, but also challenging those beliefs and understanding I can make my stuffing at Thanksgiving without apples and nuts. So recognizing that there are two sides, that yes, there's the grief and the loss, but there are also things that we are gaining and that we're recognizing. So I think those were some of the, some things that were important to me.
Well, earlier you had mentioned grief, and just to highlight from my side, every single first has a memory attached to it. And, the past is not the past until you let it go. And so wherever we can catch, oh, wow, I noticed that I'm just thinking about the past here and the 4th of July's of the past. And wow, there's some stuff I really miss about that. And so to allow yourself to, because grief is about loss, and there's always losses. And so to be able to just allow yourself to feel grief and then to say, okay, and now what? And so to be able to, but a lot of times I hear people say to me, I thought I was through that grief. I thought I was done with that. And so, the year of first is, going to be a year with episodes of grief that will show up, and just to normalize that, and to the extent that it's helpful to journal about it, to talk to a friend about it, just to be able to express. That's the key thing, right? And so I appreciate you bringing that up earlier. And then the second thing for me is shame. Shame is something that a lot of people experience as a result of going through a divorce. And there's something wrong, borrowing from Brene Brown, there's something wrong with me rather than I did something wrong, guilt. And something wrong with me, I am, as if that were true, the only one who's getting divorced, the only one. And so I failed. I am a failure, shame, failure, all those things. And of course, none of that's true. There's most relationships that end up in a divorce had an expiration date on it, probably way earlier than it actually happened. And for a lot of us, even knew that we ought not to have been in that relationship in the first place. Time and time again, as I'm talking with clients and students, they'll say, "Hey, shit, I knew," and then they did it anyway. I'm dealing with a couple in Vermont right now where, she never really loved them, and so then both of them get to experience that sense of not enoughness, to have made a constructive, sustainable, wonderful marriage. So shame is something that most people don't talk about, but it's critical, as Brene Brown has pointed out over and over again, so critical that we talk to somebody. I think of shame as emotional quicksand. If I try to get out of it by myself, the deeper I get into it. And so by reaching out to another person and saying, hey, I'm in a shame reaction, I'm having a lot of shame about, and then being able to talk about it, of course, to somebody who can empathize and understand and relate, rather than say, boy, you're right, you are screwed. So I'm just add that in.
Yeah. It's important to have those. And Brene Brown talks about that shame spiral, and that the best way out is to give it a voice, and to another person, to tell on yourself, because when you say it out loud, then you might even be able to hear some of your distortions when you say it out loud, or they might be able to be reflected back to you. And, that's another first, is when you have to introduce yourself as a divorced person, and in social situations. So there's those first, and something that comes from the theory related to post-traumatic growth is also thinking about who do you respect that has gone through this before and made it through, and So, when I was initially going through my divorce, I was used to listen to Jimmy Buffett because he'd bring my mood up. And I looked up, geez, I wonder if Jimmy Buffett's ever been divorced. So of course he had. But it's so when I get into that shame and I get into that fear about my first, I can look towards who are those models who have been before me that have done this and have made it through, because it seems like it's huge, but then understanding both, whether it's friends, family, people who are professionals, but also recognizing that we ourselves have made it through things we thought we'd never make it through.
So most people have never heard of a divorce ceremony, and it's not a common thing, but I have had the opportunity to design and officiate some divorce ceremonies, and that's so my only point in bringing that up is for some people on their anniversary day, it's a really helpful thing to gather some friends around and talk about the relationship ending, talk about the vows that they offered in the wedding ceremony, which arguably for me is the most important thing, and then create it that one way or another with friends that they can be released from those vows. In my experience, there's a lot of one of the things that gets in the way of new relationships is that in our psyche, we have made commitments to somebody else and we haven't been released from those vows. And so that has a certain psychic weight. And in my experience, it's not very commonly talked about. So it's a way to take the anniversary and make it a whole new thing and create it as a significant step forward in moving on with our life. And so you can people can look up divorce ceremonies and get some ideas about that. So that's that, and then gratitude. There's more and more research, and I've been reading a lot more, but in the last 10 years, it's really so much research has been done on the importance of the practice of gratitude. And so it's a simple thing to journal things you're grateful for. And so the practice is to do it every day. For me personally, I do it at night before I go to bed. It takes 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to write down. I don't write complete sentences. I just write the key word in the sentence. And then so I can 15 or 20 things I'm grateful for in the day. I can do that in 3 or 4 minutes. It's not a speed thing, but it doesn't take a lot of time. But then I go to bed grateful for the day and what I was able to create. Some people prefer to do it in the morning, and you can do it 2 or 3 times. So then further, the attitude of gratitude, really saying to people all day long, I'm so appreciative that you did that, or so appreciate you. And it starts to, and so gratitude is an antidote to scarcity, meaning wherever most of us have had the scarcity consciousness, I'm not enough, there's not enough, always looking for more, always not enough time, not enough money, not enough resources, and so forth. So gratitude is an antidote to that. And the research says over and over again, we cannot be happy if we're not grateful. And so it's just another step up the emotional ladder to happiness and joy and peace and love, etc. So just going to drop that in.
Yeah, something I've heard along those lines that I also think is a lovely way to do it. I sometimes have people have a buddy that they will text every day. There are 3 to 5 things, but one of the nice things is not being allowed to repeat, so that you go through the whole day looking for things to be grateful for. So it becomes a habit, because at the end of the day, you need to come up with 3 to 5 fresh things that you're grateful for. So it keeps you on the lookout, and it keeps you conscious of that gratitude throughout the day. And I like that sort of, and I guess I'm a little competitive, but I like that challenge of trying to come up with this, because then it keeps me conscious all day.
So just for the record, Anna and I have not played any games yet.
No, not with that.
There's a concept I say a concept because it's not commonly understood, called forgiveness. And everybody's heard the word. And I'm bringing it up because the past is not the past if we don't let it go. And so forgiveness, the concept of forgiveness is about letting go, surrendering. And so, um, however anybody thinks about forgiveness, what I've come to is not use the word forgiveness so much as saying, and I got this from places in Africa, I wish peace between us. And so when I come to you and I say, Ann, would you forgive me? You haven't, we all do, an unhealthy ego that says, no way, I have power over him. So when I say, Ann, I know that I hurt you when I said that, when I did that, and I wonder if we could talk about it. I really wish peace between us. Now I'm coming to you more as an adult equal and more easily aligning with, let's say, your healthy ego or your enoughness. And so the reason I'm bringing it up is to the extent that you need to, quote, forgive yourself, have peace with yourself about the fact that this relationship ended. And it had, each of us did things in the relationship that contributed to it not working, and to come to peace with that. And so regrets are something that is really, that we all have about our marriages if we pay attention to it. And regrets are, I wish I knew then what I know now. And so to just be able to have acceptance and peace, create peace more and more inside of ourselves and keep learning from it. Every time you realize you did it, there's something that you felt bad about, occasionally it might be helpful to talk to your ex about it. I say occasionally because there's so many exes that you couldn't talk to about it, and might, having worked with hundreds of people. But you certainly can do it inside, and then that you can tell me how to spell it, the Ho'oponopono practice that Dr. Len in Hawaii is so famous for. You know how to spell it?
I do not know how to spell it.
Okay, it starts with Ho'opono, and it's got a lot of P's, a lot of O's, and a lot of N's. Ho'oponopono. But the idea is that I am cleaning out my system, and I'm letting things go, and I'm just, so it's with myself. So self-forgiveness is just as important as forgiving somebody else or asking for forgiveness. And so that's an important part, it's an important part of the first year, in my experience, is clearing things out.
Yeah, and I think that, for me, the word forgiveness was a huge trigger because I wasn't going to do that. So that could have kept me stuck. But I think the concept of peace between, something else that I've heard you describe that I share with other students is we're energetically connected, right, to that person. And do we want to keep that energy anchored back there? It prevents us from being able to move forward. So understanding that our energy is connected to that person, and the importance of releasing that energy by having peace between, so it doesn't have that pull and that harness in a way.
So another aspect of moving forward is, really seeing it as, for me, seeing it as a doorway, the doorway that divorce can present us with, and stepping through that doorway into a whole new life, and having, that's a consciousness then. And the year of first, okay, I am going to create a year that's meaningful, that's enriching, that's fulfilling. And divorce is not going to be something that defines me. It's going to be something that empowers me and informs my life. There's a lot that I can have learned from this experience. When I went through my divorce, I was married, as you know, for 20 years, 22-year relationship. And at first I was angry. I was in our work, Bruce Fisher, the guy who started the whole rebuilding program, talked about the dumper and the dumpy. I was the dumpy. And so I was angry for the first 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, wait a minute, what had I done? What had I done in the relationship that contributed to not working? As soon as I asked that question, it turned it into me. And that's where, we talk about intimacy in the program, into me, I can see. And so this is a year that you can be doing a tremendous amount of learning about yourself and what you don't want to do again and what you can do differently and what you will and what you did well. And so just really like doing an audit, so to speak, and how empowering that can be. Because most people do not do that. And that one of the reasons that the divorce rate is so high for second marriages is people don't do that. 67 for seconds and 73 for thirds. And because they don't stop and pause, look in the mirror, they instantly are in a new relationship and taking the same baggage with them. There's a Buddhist saying, wherever you go, there you are. Well, consciousness. And so that's my wish for everybody who's listening to this, is to be able to really, with curiosity and empathy, reflect on, what did I do? What can I learn? What do I want to do differently? So, yeah.
Yeah, and so on two points along that line, the turning point for me, is it Katie, who's the person that does the turnaround?
Byron Katie?
Yeah, Byron Katie. So you betrayed me, I was saying about my ex, and then she has you twist it back. And it was a huge aha for me to understand I betrayed myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the turning point for me, was understanding I betrayed myself. And then it felt empowering because, well, if I betrayed myself, what is it that I can do to not continue to do that? So it gave me that. So that was one thing. And in terms of the year first and moving forward, something that has been helpful and is also understanding, yes, I've been a spouse and now I'm an ex-spouse, and now I'm divorced, but I'm also so much more than that. That is one piece of the pie. What are the other pieces? That this is part of it, but I'm also a parent, I'm also a worker, I'm also a community member or a church member, that the pie is made up of so many different things of self. And what can happen is we can become so over-focused on that piece that is, I am divorced, I am a divorcee. So understanding and remembering and stepping back, this is a piece of me, but it's not all of me.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't define me or identify me.
Mm-hmm. One of the major things that we all deal with, I've mentioned not enoughness, and that's universal. And with I'm not enough is I'm not lovable. And so in the year of firsts, in this whole next year, really coming to understand how critical it is to learn to love myself, which most people have zero experience at, really loving. So meeting your needs is a way to be loving. Being empathetic when you're going through challenging times, and going through divorce is one of the most challenging things anybody can go through. So being empathetic and reaching out for support, these are ways in which, and so physical touch and using the 5 love languages, physical touch is something that we all need it. And whether it's to have a pet or to get a hug or get a massage, when typical guy, I would just go into the store to get that shirt, to get those pants. And one of the major epiphanies I had post-divorce is when I went into a store with a woman friend of mine who was an interior designer. And we went into, I think it was Pier 1. And we went in there, and after 10 minutes, I noticed I was starting to get anxious. And what's going on? And I realized I had passed the threshold of getting in and getting out. Women are gatherers and men are hunters. It's not a generalizable thing, but I literally had to breathe through it. But then I got to see a whole lot of other things. And so now when I go in to get a shirt, I don't have to get out in 10 minutes. I am gifting myself a new shirt, and one that I really want, and I'm going to pick it out, and I'm going to be particular about it. And so when I have two daughters and a stepdaughter, and when I go into a store, I'm amazed that I have this much visibility. I see this much and they see this much, right? So it's like gifting myself the opportunity to explore, to open up. We have this amazing bookstore. And so, that's one of the things I love to gift myself is so I'm just emphasizing gifting yourself as a consciousness. In the past, I need a new shirt, I need a new blouse, whatever. No, you're gifting it to yourself. So those are ways that we can learn to love ourselves and really it's an expression and it's a practice. So it's critical because over and over again we hear if you can't give something you don't have, if you don't love yourself, then can you truly love somebody else? And so the answer is probably not. And so we keep looking for other people to love us rather than starting here. And so that's a really, really critical part of what we're offering people.
Yeah, and I think that I do love the week in our program where we take the 5 love languages and we turn them around and apply them to ourselves and becoming comfortable with that because many people are not comfortable putting themselves first. I know
Right.
I wasn't. I was used to being on the back burner. So being comfortable going and saying, I want or need this, and I'm gonna gift this to myself, whether it's massage, whatever it is, but becoming comfortable with meeting my own needs and not expecting other people to do that for me. I think that it's challenging initially, but it gets more comfortable as you talked about sort of going into peer 1, as all of these first do over time. And, in traditional therapy, we'll call it exposure therapy. So the more we face these things, the more confidence we get in that we can and will make it through honoring ourselves.
So one of the things that often happens is that when we get divorced, not everybody, I think about a quarter of the population is involved in a church. And oftentimes with divorce, one of the people that was involved with the divorce will no longer be involved with the church because, you just were getting divorced. And so, and then with that goes a whole group of people that I used to be connected to. With that goes, rituals and so forth. And so that's a major thing for people who are religious or oriented in that way is to purposely get out there and find that new church and that new community of faith. But beyond that, further is the opportunity to say, wait a minute, my whole life I've been in this relationship and we did this, whatever this was in terms of spirituality or religion. And, what if there's other ways to think about it? And I say this because having walked with a lot of people, it was like, wow, I'm re-envision God. And so for some people that is so liberating because they've had such a very narrow and tight construct of who God is or what God is. And some people go from very religious to being atheistic, whatever. In our program, of course, we don't have any particular spiritual orientation that we teach from, but in this dialogue with you, I know that it's really important for everybody to have some kind of understanding, whatever it is. And this divorce provides an opportunity to really dig in a new way, like, okay, here's where I am in my life. And now I've had this experience. What do I know and what do I not know? And what do I want to learn about? So something to add in.
Yeah. Another aspect of ourselves that's important to pay attention to. And so often, and so many of the students in our classes, I had been married at a very young age, came from their families of origin, and with the same beliefs, the same type of religious habit, and never thought about alternatives to that. And this life event has allowed them to look at other options, but also in terms of understanding, but also creating community around that exploration.
Right. So, in our work together, we've talked about Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning, and the questions he offered and the perspective he offered, and how each of us, how critical it is that we create meaning in our lives. And, when he offered the questions, what is life asking of you? Or what is God asking of you? Or what is it you can do today that could make this the best possible day? And so versus being divorced and poor me, life sucks, shit happens, and being in very much victim, what we call victim, or not enough consciousness. And so, coming from the place of being sourced and resourced, I have something to offer. And I'm a partner in life, where it's very different than many of us were codependent in our previous relationship. What does he need? What does she need? And if she's upset or he's upset, then I'm upset. And so what do I got to do to get him or her to not be upset so I cannot be upset? The codependency. So this is a whole different thing, really. No, this is my life. And Mary Oliver in one of her I think it was Summer's Day, said, what is it that you would do with your one wild and precious life? And so we are invited to, by Viktor Frankl, especially, how we open the door to that, and like, no, you can be a partner in life. And there's one, I mentioned Blackson. He wrote a book called You Are the One. And there was a man in India that he encountered who had no feet, no legs, no arms below his elbow, and he was blind. And he was singing devotional songs. And the author was startled and went to ask him, well, what is it that enables you to do this? Because like he's thinking, how could I do that? I can see, I can hear, I have legs, arms. And the person that was doing that was singing, said, life may give you what you want. Life may never give you what you want, but you can always give life who you are. And even as I repeat it again, it's like I'm still can feel the energy going through me, like, wow, every one of us is presented every day with that opportunity if we choose to see it that way. Again, Viktor Frankl saying, hey, you and life are one. There's no separation there. So for me, that's always a reminder. Will I love myself? Will I love my life? And will I give my best to life? And how the year first provides that opportunity for all of us to do. I'm just checking my notes to see if there's anything else. Is there anything else that you can think to add in?
No, I mean, other than just building on what you had said and in terms of, because I think, that wasn't there, I don't know if it's Viktor Frankl who talked about that the survivors were the ones that focused on what can I give today, who were focusing on what versus what has happened to me. So the victim versus, so where we put our energy, and then the being able to release what I had planned. Who says this?
Joseph
Campbell. Yeah.
You have to let go of the life I had planned
Yeah.
in order to embrace the life that is waiting for us.
That is waiting for me. Yeah. So that has always been inspirational.
There's an expectancy that goes with that. There's a life that's waiting for me. Yeah. And that's where the doorway, you've got to step through that door. And so it's not a dead end. The divorce isn't the dead end. I guess there's one other thing I was going to add in, and that was about fitting in versus belonging. Almost all of us have spent a lifetime trying to fit in. Would you accept me? What group can I fit into? And now coming to the place, I belong here. I belong in this thing called my life. And I'm the one who's creating it. And there's not a question of being enough. I am enough, and I'm not going to play roles anymore. The masks that we wear and the way that we play quote psychological games to fit in. I'm going to be me, the authentic me. The authentic me belongs wherever I am, period. I'm here. This is me. You know, it's not a question. Do I belong here or not? So we human beings have a unique capacity to do that. Question our worthiness and our belongingness. We look around in nature, and there's no other living thing that does that. You know, I just belong here. This is where I belong. So it's no small thing to just own that I belong. And I'm going to give up fitting in. That's an old thing. So, any postscript beyond that?
No, I think the only thing I'd add to that sort of is I envision what it looks like and what it feels like to feel like I belong inside myself. What does that feel like? And resonating, like thinking of a time that I felt like I belonged, I wasn't trying to fit in, and understanding what that feels like and looks like for me so that I can aspire to that, but just, you know, and I know what it's like. And I remember having this total feeling where I really believed for the first time, probably I am enough. I am completely and totally loved and lovable, just as I am. And actually, I always have been, and I always will be. And believing that heart and soul, and I can even align with and remember and feel that within my soul. I can call that back. So just having those touchstones sometimes can be helpful.
Yeah, good. So I guess with that, we will end this particular session. And, you know, people have any questions about any of the programs, they can just go to our website and learn more on rebuilders.net or startingoveragain.com. So, Ann, thanks. And we'll look forward to more conversations down the road.
Sounds great. Thank you, Nick.
You bet. Be well.
Yeah, thanks.
I know.